what it is to die well is knowing that death is given to you as well, sort of as a call home, and being like, thank you for this beautiful life. And we also have to have the courage to be like, thank you for this beautiful suffering. Thank you for this beautiful death.
Really just surrendering to Jesus, to his will, and but not really worrying about what the future brings.
Like, some of it is just like having good personal relationships and just not having like any ties left undone. But then it's also like living life so that when you look back in it, you can just be like, I'm so happy that that's what I did.
Here at Benedictine College, death, of course, isn't likely often at the top of these students' minds, but woven into the Catholic sensibility is the desire to die well. And St. Benedict did invite his followers to keep death daily before their eyes. So the Benedictine monks on campus at St. Benedict's Abbey continue their namesake's tradition of praying every day for a happy death.
Death for the Christian, of course, won't be the end. It will be a new beginning for us. And so to keep that new beginning in our hearts every day before ourselves as a meditation, I think that's why St. Benedict is such a good patron for a happy death.
Just down the hill at the college's philosophy department, Professor Dr. Jean Rioux teaches what the great philosophers had to say about dying well.
Someone like Plato would say, when you take into account that you're going to be facing an eternity in the next life, and you compare that to the finite amount of time that you're living now, there's no mathematical comparison between the two in terms of importance. So anything you can do in this life to bring into the next eternity, right, is worth doing. What sorts of things can you bring? Well, one would be virtue, one would be knowledge. So a good life in this life is going to give you a good eternity.
It's not just a philosophical question, though, but one for a theology class. It's about meeting the Creator, an issue between each individual and God himself.
Particularly what that good death means is that one has to get the ultimate goal of one's life correct in looking past death, but ultimately to the resurrection of the body and the hopes of the beatific vision and being united with God forever in heaven. And is really devoted to
Dr. Marielle Courtois has long studied the ars moriendi, the art of dying.
The good death is one that one orders one's whole life to the will of God, is spiritually prepared, is constantly relying on God's grace, contemplating the love of God, and then also ultimately, as St. John Paul II describes, a final act of obedience to God's will when one's final moment of death does arrive.
But what if at the end of life you're faced with some huge complication? What if the end is prolonged and there's great pain and suffering, something you pray you'll never experience but you may not be able to avoid? Bioethicists study these situations and try to provide answers.
The moment of death is the single most important moment in our entire existence, because the state of our soul at that moment determines whether we're going to heaven or hell.
Dr. Joseph Meany leads the National Catholic Bioethics Center based in Philadelphia.
There's a tendency to do what's called palliative sedation, where the person is put under, and sometimes all the way until death. And the problem with that, of course, is if they're not spiritually prepared before they go under, that's the state they're in when they die. And so I think it's very important to realize that consciousness is a value, and the U.S. bishops have spoken about this, the church has spoken about this. It's very important for individuals to be able to prepare properly, and part of that is to have a clear mind.
Just on the edge of campus, Father Jeremy Hepler runs the parish of St. Benedict. He says embracing our mortality and our immortal souls and staying close to the sacraments are keys to preparing well for death. And in his experience, it's important for the faithful to leave their wishes for their final moments in writing.
There's been moments in my experience as a pastor of great joy in those moments where peace and reconciliation truly take hold. There have also been moments of frustration when I am dealing with a family who's already made arrangements for a funeral by the time I get called, and their parent who was very faithful may have even gone to Mass every day. Because the children no longer go to church, the children choose not to have a funeral Mass for them. Fortunately, in most of those situations, we at least are able to have a funeral service.
Across the city of Atchison, Kansas, the imminence of death is very real at the Dooley Center, a nursing home run by Benedictine sisters, for Benedictine sisters and family members. In a sense, Sister Loretta McGuire came to peace with her own mortality as she prepared many of her fellow sisters for death here.
And when I worked with our sisters who are dying, when I worked with people in the community, I let them know they were dying. They might say, "What is wrong with me?" You know, and I would say, "You are dying. Is there anything you need?" Really and truly, when we are dying, we need to step out of the way, because that is a very sacred time between the dying person and God.
Of course, dying isn't just an academic question to be studied or something that other people go through, but a very real situation that all of us must experience. None can avoid it, and when it happens, not all are prepared for it. We can only hope and pray that we will be, having lived well so as to die well. In Atchison, Kansas, Alan Holdren, EWTN News in Depth.